The sound of metal on dirt was the only sound for miles. Clang, scrape, clang. Daisy Blackwood drove her shovel into the hard Montana soil, her tears mixing with the red dust. It was 1878, and she was digging a grave. Alone. Since dawn, the 22-year-old widow had been at it, her white dress now a mess of sweat and grime. Dark clouds were rolling in from the mountains, promising a storm. She had to finish. She had to get him in the ground. From the top of a nearby hill, a rider watched her. Isaac Thornton pulled his stallion to a halt, his hand shielding his eyes. He'd been riding this territory for 15 years. He'd seen shootouts, stampedes, and blizzards that could freeze a man solid in his saddle. But he'd never seen this. A beautiful woman, alone, digging a grave with a storm about to break. The homestead behind her was small, just a cabin and a barn, the kind of place built on hope, the kind of place where dreams came to die. Thunder cracked in the distance. Isaac nudged his horse down the slope, moving slow. He didn't want to spook her. She didn't even look up as he approached, just kept digging with a grim, desperate rhythm. "Madam," Isaac called out, his voice soft. He swung down from his horse. "A storm's coming. Can I offer you some help?" She spun around in a flash, holding the shovel like a spear. Her blue eyes were wide, filled with a mix of terror and pure exhaustion. "Stay back," she warned, her voice hoarse. "I don't need help from any strangers." Isaac held up his hands, slow and easy. "No harm meant, ma'am. Just saw you out here by yourself. That's a heavy burden for one person to carry." His eyes flicked to the side. A small pine box sat on the grass. It was crudely made, but you could tell whoever built it had cared. A lot. "My husband," Daisy said, her voice cracking as she followed his gaze. "Pneumonia. Took him 3 days ago." She gestured at the half-finished hole in the ground, a look of complete despair on her face. It was a lie. But Isaac didn't know that yet. Isaac just nodded, his face grim. "I'm sorry for your loss. My name's Isaac Thornton. I work for the R, over east." Another lie. He hadn't worked for the R in years. "Let me help you," he said, his voice gentle. "We need to get him laid to rest before this storm breaks wide open." Daisy hesitated, her eyes scanning him. He looked like any other cowboy. Worn denim, leather vest, boots that had seen better days. But there was no gun belt. That was strange. And his eyes, they were kind. Too kind for this part of the country. "Daisy Blackwood," she said, finally lowering the shovel. "My husband was Daniel." Just then, the first fat drops of rain began to fall. The sky opened up, and a downpour started, turning the red dust to mud. Daisy looked from the sky to the grave, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Let's get him inside," Isaac said, his voice firm but gentle. "We'll finish this when the weather clears." She just nodded, too tired to argue. Together they carried Daniel's simple coffin into the small cabin as lightning lit up the sky. The cabin was sparse but clean. A table, 2 chairs, a stove. The only personal things were a few books and a photograph on the wall. A picture of Daisy and Daniel, smiling, full of hope. "I'll see to the horses," Isaac said, already heading back into the rain. "Then I'll get a fire going." He was gone before she could say a word. She watched him through the window as he moved with an easy confidence, leading the horses to the barn. When he came back, soaked to the bone, he didn't complain. He just built a fire, the warmth slowly chasing the chill from the small room. "When's the last time you ate something, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, his voice low. I don't remember," she whispered. He nodded, not judging. "Sit down. I've got some jerky and hardtack in my saddlebags. It's not much, but it'll keep you on your feet." She sank into a chair, watching as he prepared a simple meal. The storm outside was getting worse, hail now hammering against the roof. "Looks like I'll be stuck here till this passes," Isaac said, setting a cup of coffee in front of her. "I can sleep in the barn." "No," Daisy said, surprising herself. "The roof leaks. You can sleep here, by the fire." The truth was, she was terrified of being alone. Alone with her dead husband in a box and a storm raging outside. Isaac just nodded, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. That night the storm howled. Isaac made a bed on the floor by the fire, while Daisy hid behind a curtain to change. The cabin felt so small, so fragile against the wind. "Daniel, he loved this place," Daisy said, her voice barely a whisper from her bed. "He was going to breed horses. Said it was the best grazing land in all of Montana." "It's good land," Isaac agreed from the floor, "but it takes a strong will to tame it." "I don't know what I'm going to do," she confessed. "I can't run this place by myself, but I've got nowhere else to go." He was silent for a long moment. "We were only married 14 months. His parents didn't approve. They said I was just a shopkeeper's daughter. They were right." "The frontier is a hard place," Isaac finally said. "But it's full of second chances. Don't make any decisions until the grief has passed." His words were comforting, but they were also calculated. Every word was chosen to gain her trust, because Isaac knew this wasn't about grief. It was about survival, and he was running out of time. Morning came and the world was mud. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clean, cold sky. Isaac was already outside digging. The grave had half filled with water overnight. He was bailing it out with a bucket. "I'll get Daniel's Bible," Daisy said, her voice hollow. The burial was quick. Isaac had lined the grave with flat stones. They lowered the pine box into the earth. Daisy read a passage, her voice shaking. When she was done, Isaac began to fill the grave. Each thud of dirt on the coffin was like a hammer blow to her heart. When it was over, he stuck a crude wooden cross into the fresh mound of earth. "I can carve his name for you," he offered. Daisy just nodded, and then her knees gave out. She collapsed next to the grave, sobbing uncontrollably. Isaac knelt beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. He let her cry, his face a mask of sympathy. But inside, his mind was racing. He was looking at the cabin, the barn, the way the land was laid out. He was looking for something, something Daniel had told him about, something worth killing for. "I need to thank you, Mr. Thornton," Daisy said, finally getting to her feet. "You've been too kind." "Anyone would have done the same," he said. "No," she said, shaking her head. "They wouldn't. Not out here." He looked at her, his expression serious. "Mrs. Blackwood, winter is coming. Are you prepared? Do you have enough supplies?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Daniel took care of all that." "Let me take a look," Isaac said. "Let's see where you stand." She agreed, grateful for the help. They spent the next few hours going through the root cellar and the pantry. The truth was grim. "You have about a month's worth of food," Isaac told her. "Maybe 6 weeks if you stretch it. It's not enough to get through the winter." Daisy's face went pale. "What can I do?" "You could sell the homestead," he said slowly. "Or you could try to make a go of it, but you'd need help." "I have no money to hire anyone," she whispered. Isaac took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. "I'm between jobs right now. The R let some hands go. I could stay on, help you get ready for winter, help with those horses your husband left behind. In the spring, you'd be in a much better position." She stared at him, suspicion in her eyes. "Why would you do that? You're a stranger." "I know what it's like to lose everything," Isaac said, his voice thick with emotion. He told her a story about losing his family to influenza. A story designed to break down her walls. A story that was a complete and total lie. "I couldn't pay you," she said. "Room and board is all I ask," he said. "Maybe a share of any horses we sell." She looked at him, a long, hard look. Her instincts screamed at her to be careful. But desperation was a powerful thing. "1 month," she said. "We'll see how things are in 1 month." 1 month, he agreed, shaking her hand. His grip was firm, reassuring. But as he looked out at the valley, his eyes weren't filled with kindness. They were filled with a cold, hard purpose. He wasn't here to help a grieving widow. He was here because Daniel Blackwood hadn't died of pneumonia. He'd been murdered, and Isaac was here to find his killers. The first week was a blur of hard work. Isaac was a machine. He fixed the barn roof, mended fences, and started working with the wild mustangs Daniel had captured. He moved with a quiet efficiency that both impressed and unnerved Daisy. He seemed to know the homestead intimately, as if he'd been there before. Daisy kept busy in the garden, harvesting and canning. They ate their meals together in near silence, a polite distance between them. Isaac slept in the barn, always up before the sun. But at night Daisy would see the faint glow of his lantern from the barn window. He wasn't sleeping. He was searching. On the 8th day, Isaac told her he needed to ride into the town of Gallatin for supplies. "You should come with me," he suggested. "Get away from this place for a day." She was hesitant. The thought of facing the townspeople, their pity, their questions. It was too much, but Isaac was persuasive. "You can't hide forever, Daisy." He used her first name. It was the first time. It felt strange, but she agreed. The ride to town was quiet. Isaac pointed out landmarks, his knowledge of the area surprisingly deep for someone who claimed to be just passing through. Gallatin was a dusty main street and a handful of buildings. As soon as they rode in, heads turned. Whispers started. Martha Finch, the storekeeper's wife, rushed out to meet them. "Oh, Daisy dear, we heard about poor Daniel. Such a tragedy." She hugged Daisy, her eyes flicking over to Isaac. "This is Mr. Thornton," Daisy said. "He's helping me out at the homestead." Martha's eyebrows shot up. While Isaac bought flour and salt, Martha pulled Daisy aside. "Is this wise, dear?" she hissed. "Alone out there with a strange man. People are talking." "Let them talk," Daisy said, her voice stronger than she felt. The town reverend, a portly man named Walsh, made a point of stopping them on their way out. He offered his condolences, then turned his suspicious gaze on Isaac. "Mrs. Blackwood, the church is prepared to help you find a more suitable arrangement," he said, his meaning clear. "Thank you, Reverend," Daisy said, her back straight. "But Mr. Thornton and I have things under control." As they rode out of town, the weight of all those judging eyes felt heavy on her shoulders. "Small towns," Isaac said, breaking the silence. "Sorry if my being there is causing you trouble." "It doesn't matter," she said. But it did. That night, after they'd put the supplies away, Daisy found she couldn't sleep. She walked to the window and looked out at the barn. The lantern was on again. What was he doing out there? She pulled on her boots and a shawl and slipped out of the cabin. The night was cold and silent. She crept to the barn, the door slightly ajar, and peered inside. Isaac wasn't mending tack or brushing down the horses. He had a floorboard pulled up, and he was digging in the dirt underneath with his bare hands. Daisy's heart hammered in her chest. Every instinct that had been whispering warnings was now screaming. This man was not who he said he was. He hadn't just stumbled upon her. He was looking for something. She backed away slowly, her mind reeling. Pneumonia. That's what she'd told him. It's what she'd told everyone. But as she stared at the dark silhouette of the man in her barn, digging in the dead of night, She knew he was getting closer to the truth that Daniel hadn't been sick at all. The truth was, Daniel had been shot, and the last thing he'd said to her, as he lay dying on the cabin floor, was a single, terrifying word. Isaac. Daisy didn't confront him. She couldn't. What would she say? I saw you digging under the barn floor, just like I've been digging under the cabin floor for the past week. Because that was her secret. Daniel had told her he'd hidden something that would set them up for life. He'd been paranoid for weeks before he died, always looking over his shoulder. If anything happens to me, he'd whispered one night, it's under the floor. Find it before they do. But he never said which floor, so she played her part. The grieving widow, helpless, alone. She watched Isaac by day and searched by night. It was a dangerous game. Two liars, living under the same roof, both hunting for the same prize. One evening, trying to push him for information, she asked him about his past. Where did you learn so much about horses? He looked up from his plate, his eyes unreadable. My father. We had a ranch in Texas, before the war. What happened to it? She pressed. A shadow crossed his face. It was burned. I lost everything. My family, my home. I've been drifting ever since. It was a good story, a believable story. But she could see the lie in his eyes. He was hiding something much bigger. He was watching her too, she realized. He saw the way her eyes scanned the cabin, the way she sometimes tapped the floorboards with her foot. He knew she was looking. The tension between them was a taut wire. Days of shared work, nights of secret searching. It was exhausting and confusing. Because despite the lies, despite the danger, she was starting to feel something for him. He was kind to her. He was protective. He worked harder than any man she'd ever known. She found herself watching him as he gentled the wild mustangs, his patience and strength a thing of beauty. And then the first snow came, a light dusting at first, then a heavy blanket. They were trapped. The trail to Gallatin was impassable. It was just the two of them, the secrets, and the ever-present ghost of her dead husband. One afternoon they worked together, stacking firewood against the cabin wall. You should call me Daisy, she said, breaking a long silence. It feels strange, you still calling me Mrs. Blackwood. His expression softened, a real, genuine smile. Daisy, then, and I'm Isaac. That small change shifted everything. It felt more intimate, more dangerous. That night a blizzard hit. The wind howled like a demon, rattling the cabin to its foundations. They sat by the fire, the storm forcing them into a small circle of warmth and light. Is that why you never settled down? She asked, her voice quiet. Because you're afraid of losing everything again. The question hit its mark. He stopped whittling the piece of wood in his hand. Maybe, he said, his voice low. Or maybe I just never found a reason to stop drifting. His eyes met hers across the flames, and in that moment, the lies fell away. There was something real between them, something powerful and terrifying. Daisy knew she had to break the spell. It's late, she said, standing up. He just nodded. Good night, Daisy. As the winter deepened, so did their strange, unspoken relationship. The 1 month he was supposed to stay came and went. Neither of them mentioned it. He was part of the homestead now, part of her life. On a rare, clear day after a storm, he suggested they ride the property line, check for snowdrifts. As they sat on their horses on a high ridge, looking down at the small cabin nestled in the valley, he started talking about the future. This land could support twice as many horses, he said. In the spring, we could clear that south meadow. He kept saying we. Are you making plans, Isaac? She asked softly. He turned to her, his face serious. Just thinking out loud. But before he could say more, A sound cracked through the cold air. A rifle shot. Isaac yelled in pain, clutching his arm. Blood bloomed dark against the white snow. His horse reared, terrified. "Ride!" he shouted, pulling his own pistol with his good hand. "Get back to the cabin! Now!" Another shot splintered the tree next to her head. Daisy didn't hesitate. She spurred her horse, galloping madly down the hill, Isaac right behind her. They burst into the barn, slammed the doors, and Isaac slumped against the wall, his face pale. "Rustlers," he grunted through gritted teeth. "Must have seen the horses." But Daisy knew better. It wasn't rustlers. It was them. They had found her. She half carried him into the cabin, her fear a cold knot in her stomach. She grabbed whiskey and clean rags. The bullet had just grazed his arm, a bloody furrow in the muscle. As she cleaned the wound, her hands shaking, their faces were only inches apart. He watched her, his expression intense. "Thank you," she whispered, "for getting me out of there." "I'd never let anything happen to you, Daisy," he said, his voice low and raw. And then he leaned in and kissed her. It was hesitant at first, then deepened. It was a kiss full of desperation and fear and all the unspoken things that had been simmering between them for weeks. She pulled back, breathless, confused. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "It's just, Daniel." "I know," he said, giving her space. "I understand." But he didn't understand. He couldn't possibly understand the storm of guilt and fear and impossible longing that was tearing her apart. That night Isaac didn't go back to the barn. He kept watch from the cabin window, his pistol in his hand. The rustlers didn't come back, but the threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The attack changed everything. The game was over. The next morning, as the sun rose over a pristine, snow-covered world, Daisy walked over to the fireplace where Isaac sat, cleaning his gun. "It wasn't rustlers, was it?" she said. It wasn't a question. He stopped, his hands going still. He looked up at her, and the kindness in his eyes was gone, replaced by something harder, something she'd suspected was there all along. "No," he said, "it wasn't." "You knew Daniel," she said, her voice flat. He nodded slowly. "We were partners. This homestead, the horses, it was supposed to be ours. I put up the money. He put up the work." The pieces clicked into place. The way he knew the land. His search. "What happened?" she whispered. "Daniel got greedy," Isaac said, his voice cold. "He was supposed to buy horses with the money I gave him. Instead, he got involved with the wrong people. A man named Silas Croft. They were running stolen gold. Daniel was supposed to hold it for them, hide it here. But he got scared. He tried to double-cross them." He looked at her, his eyes boring into hers. "They killed him for it, Daisy. They shot him and left him to die. And they think the gold is still here. That's what they came back for yesterday, and they won't stop until they find it." Daisy felt the floor drop out from under her. "Gold, not money. Stolen gold. And you?" she asked, her heart pounding. "You're here for the gold, too." "I'm here for what's mine," he said. "And I'm here because I made a promise to Daniel a long time ago that I'd look out for his family if anything happened. I didn't know he'd gotten married until I started looking for him." He stood up, walking towards her. "I lied to you, Daisy, about everything, but I wasn't lying when I said I'd never let anything happen to you." The air crackled between them. All the secrets were out. Or so she thought. "Daniel didn't die of pneumonia," she said softly, confessing her own lie. "He was shot. He bled out on the floor, right there." She pointed to the spot. Isaac's face tightened. "He told you where he hid it, didn't he?" She shook her head. "He just said, under the floor. I don't know where." Suddenly, Isaac's eyes widened. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the spot she'd just pointed to. The spot where her husband had died. He dropped to his knees, his hands running over the floorboards. He found the edge of a loose plank and pried it up. Underneath was a small, dark space, and inside that space was a heavy leather satchel. He pulled it out and opened it. It was full of gold bars, gleaming in the morning light. They stared at it, a fortune that had cost one man his life and brought two others to the brink. "We have to go," Isaac said, his voice urgent. "Now, they'll be back." But as he spoke, they heard it, the sound of hoofbeats in the snow. A lot of them. They weren't just coming back, they were coming back with an army. Daisy ran to the window. 4 riders were coming down the hill, rifles glinting in the sun. They were trapped. "Get the rifle," Isaac commanded, grabbing his pistol and the bag of gold. "There's a root cellar under the bed. It has a tunnel. It leads out to the woods behind the barn. Daniel showed it to me when we were planning the cabin. A way out, in case of trouble." Of course, Daniel had a secret tunnel. They scrambled, shoving furniture against the door as the first shots shattered the window. Glass flew everywhere. Daisy grabbed Daniel's old rifle, her hands steady. Isaac had taught her to shoot over the last few weeks, turning their practice into a grim preparation for a day he knew was coming. "They'll try to burn us out," Isaac yelled over the gunfire. "We have to move now." He kicked open the trapdoor to the cellar. It was dark and smelled of damp earth. "You first," he said, pushing her towards the opening. "I'll hold them off." "No," she said, her voice firm. "We go together." A bullet ripped through the wall next to her head, showering them with splinters. There was no more time to argue. He nodded, and they descended into the darkness, pulling the heavy door shut above them. The sound of gunfire was muffled now, but the shouts of the men outside were terrifyingly clear. The tunnel was narrow and cold. Daisy could hear Isaac right behind her, his breathing heavy. They crawled on their hands and knees, the bag of gold thumping against Isaac's back. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only a few minutes before they saw a faint light ahead. The tunnel ended behind a thicket of pine trees, 100 yards from the barn. They emerged, blinking in the bright snow. The cabin was now fully engulfed in flames, black smoke billowing into the clear blue sky. The 4 men were circling it on horseback, firing into the inferno. They thought they had won. "Our horses are still in the barn," Isaac whispered. "We can make a run for it." They crept through the trees, circling around to the back of the barn. The horses were skittish, smelling the smoke. Isaac calmed them with a low voice, his hands gentle. They were about to lead them out when they heard a voice from the front of the barn. "Check the barn. They might have tried to hide in there." It was Silas Croft. His voice was gravelly, cruel. Isaac looked at Daisy, his eyes dark with a terrible resolve. "Get on your horse," he mouthed. "When I say go, you ride. Don't look back. Don't stop for anything. Ride to Gallatin. Get the sheriff." "What about you?" she whispered, her heart seizing. "I'm going to give them something to chase," he said. He slung the heavy bag of gold over his own saddle horn. He was making himself the target. The barn door creaked open. A man stepped in, his rifle raised. "Now, Daisy! Go!" Isaac roared. He fired his pistol, and the man at the door dropped. Daisy didn't think. She just acted. She swung into the saddle, kicked her horse into a gallop, and burst out the back of the barn, heading for the open country. Isaac followed a second later, firing back at the men who were now shouting in surprise and anger. The race was on. Snow flew from the horses' hooves as they galloped across the valley. Bullets whizzed past Daisy's ears. She could hear Isaac's horse thundering behind her, and the shouts of Silas and his men closing in. They were faster. Their horses were fresh. Isaac pulled up alongside her, his face grim. They're gaining. I'm going to cut east. Draw them off. You keep heading south. Isaac, no, she screamed. It's the only way, he yelled back. He reached over, his hand grabbing hers for a brief second. Live, Daisy. Build something good. And then he veered away, heading towards a rocky canyon. The bag of gold on his saddle was a clear target. Just as he'd planned, Silas and his men followed him, leaving Daisy to ride on alone. She didn't look back. She rode until her lungs burned and her horse was slick with sweat. She rode until the sounds of gunfire faded into the vast silence of the Montana wilderness. She made it to Gallatin by nightfall, half frozen and exhausted, and collapsed in the sheriff's office, gasping out the story. A posse was formed, but they knew it was hopeless. The blizzard was starting up again. No one could survive a night in that canyon, especially not with a gunshot wound and a gang of killers on his trail. Isaac Thornton was as good as dead. Daisy waited in Gallatin for 3 days. The blizzard raged, trapping everyone in the small town. Martha Finch took her in, clucking with a mixture of pity and, "I told you so." The whole town was talking. About the gold, the fire, the mysterious cowboy who had ridden in and sacrificed himself for the pretty young widow. On the 4th day, the storm broke. The sheriff and his posse rode out. Daisy insisted on going with them. They found the homestead a smoking ruin. The bodies of Silas Croft and his men were in the canyon, half buried in the snow. They had clearly fought amongst themselves, probably over the gold. But of Isaac and the gold itself, there was no sign. They searched for 2 days. They found his horse, dead from a bullet. They found tracks that led to a frozen river and then disappeared. The official story was that he'd tried to cross, fallen through the ice, and been swept away, the weight of the gold pulling him down. Isaac Thornton was gone. Daisy returned to the ashes of her home. There was nothing left. Daniel was dead. Isaac was dead. The life she had started to dream of had been burned to the ground. She had nothing. No home, no money, no one. She sold the land for pennies on the dollar to a rancher who was expanding his holdings. With the little money she had, she bought a ticket on an eastbound stagecoach. There was nothing for her in Montana but ghosts. As the stagecoach pulled away from Gallatin, she didn't look back. She stared straight ahead, her face a pale, emotionless mask. The other passengers gave her a wide berth. They knew her story, the tragic widow of Blackwood Valley. The journey was long and brutal. Days turned into weeks. She crossed the plains, the rivers, the mountains, leaving the West further and further behind. She ended up in St. Louis, a bustling city full of noise and people. It was the opposite of Montana in every way. She got a job as a seamstress, working long hours in a stuffy room for barely enough money to live. She lived in a small, cramped boarding house room. She spoke to no one. She made no friends. The fire in her eyes, the fire Isaac had seen and tried to rekindle, was gone. She was just a shell. A year passed, then another. Spring arrived in St. Louis, bringing green leaves to the trees and a warmth that felt foreign and unwelcome. Daisy was walking home from work one evening, her head down, just another anonymous face in the crowd. She passed a livery stable, the familiar smell of horses and hay hitting her. For a moment, she was back in Montana, in the barn with Isaac. A sharp pain lanced through her heart. She was about to hurry on when she heard a sound. A man's voice, low and patient, talking to a horse. "Easy now, girl, easy. Just a long journey, that's all. We're almost there." The voice. It couldn't be. Her heart started hammering against her ribs. She turned, her eyes scanning the dusty interior of the stable. And then she saw him. He was thinner, and there was a long, jagged scar running down the side of his face. His hair was longer. But it was him. Isaac. He was alive. He looked up, as if he felt her eyes on him. His own eyes widened in disbelief. "Daisy," he whispered. She couldn't speak. She could only stare. All the pain, all the grief, all the numbness of the past 2 years washed away in a single, overwhelming wave. He took a step towards her, then another. He moved like a man who was seeing a ghost. "I thought you were dead," she finally choked out. "I almost was," he said, his voice raspy. "Croft shot me. I fell into the river. The current carried me miles downstream. A trapper found me, patched me up. He had hidden the gold before Croft and his men caught up to him. After he healed, he'd gone back for it. But he never went back to Gallatin." "I heard you'd left," he said. "Sold the homestead. I thought you wanted to forget, to start over. I didn't want to bring all that trouble back into your life." He'd spent the last 2 years building something. He'd used the gold, Daniel's share and his own, to buy a huge tract of land in Oregon, a place with green valleys and tall trees, a place to build a real horse ranch, the one he and Daniel had always talked about. "I named it the Blackwood Ranch," he said softly. "In his memory, in yours." Tears were streaming down Daisy's face. All this time, she thought he was gone. All this time, he thought she wanted to forget him. "I never forgot you," she whispered. He closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to cup her face. "I've looked for you, Daisy. I hired agents. I sent letters. But you just vanished." "I wanted to," she said. "I wanted to erase everything." "Can you stop?" he asked, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "Can you stop running? Come with me. Come home. Home." It was a word she hadn't let herself think about in 2 years. She looked into his eyes, the same kind eyes she remembered from that first day. The kindness was still there, but now it was deeper, tempered by hardship and loss. She didn't need to say anything. Her answer was in her eyes. He leaned down and kissed her, and it wasn't a kiss of desperation or fear. It was a kiss of homecoming, a kiss that promised a new beginning, built on the ashes of the old. They left St. Louis the next day, heading west once more. But this time they weren't running from the past. They were riding towards the future. Together. The Thornton Ranch in Oregon became a legend. They built a beautiful home, raised the finest horses in the territory, and had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. The ghosts of Montana never fully left them, but they learned to live with them. They were scars, not open wounds. Years later, when Daisy was an old woman, her hair as white as snow, her grandchildren would ask her to tell them the story of the cowboy and the widow. She would smile, her blue eyes still bright, and she would tell them about a lonely grave, a terrible storm, and the stranger who rode out of the wilderness and showed her that even after the most devastating fire, life and love could grow again. If you enjoyed this story of survival and second chances, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the forgotten corners of history.